This is essentially a user's guide to my presentations for the Basic Board Review Prep podcasts. My podcasts are composed primarily of questions consisting of a stem and 4 distractors. There will be an explanation for each incorrect response, as well as a discussion of the correct response. I use this format because multiple studies have validated the efficacy of using questions to study. In this study, using study bank questions was one of the best predictors of performance on USMLE Step 1. The use of study bank questions had an even higher correlation with USMLE performance than the number of days studied. In a different investigation, the authors studied the use of 4 different tools and determined that only one factor, use of a question bank, correlated with USMLE scores. While test-enhanced learning isn't quite the same as using questions to study, it still demonstrates the value of committing to an answer. Presumably this is the same reason that using an audience response system has also been frequently determined to result in improved learning. Although you probably didn't know specific data, you already knew that studying from question banks was effective. The second thing of which you need to be aware is that my podcasts rely heavily on graphics elements. That's because a lot of research in educational psychology has demonstrated that presentations which incorporate a visual display of graphics elements, accompanied by spoken words, is more effective than just having words on the screen. That's especially true when the presenter simply reads the words that are presented visually on the slide. The educational theory, which seems well established, is that you have 2 channels to process information, a visual channel and an auditory channel. The process involves listening to words and viewing images. Words on a screen are processed the same as images. Accordingly, if the presentation consists of words on a screen, you are wasting your visual channel by reading the words. The dual channel theory states that the learner selects words and images and organizes them in working memory to create a verbal model and a pictorial model. These models are then integrated and combined with prior knowledge to create a long-term memory. The catch with using graphic elements is that they should provide additional information and not just be decorative. Contrast this slide, which may be cute but doesn't really communicate anything, with a prior slide which shows the integration of the 2 channels to improve learning. Think about what you do. When you're in a presentation for which the presenter has a lot of words on the screen, what do you actually do? Don't you read the words on the screen as the presenter is talking before you actually start to listen to the words? Even worse, do you read the words on the screen while listening to the presenter to see if the words on the screen are the same as those spoken? If so, you're using part of your processing power to compare those 2 sources as opposed to learning what is actually being said. Although I haven't always been able to find a graphic element that adequately communicates the essential points, you probably won't find many slides, other than perhaps a summary slide, that is solely text repeated in my narration. The third thing is that each podcast will be limited to about 10 minutes in duration and contain 3 to 5 questions, so that each question and the subsequent discussion is 2 or 3 minutes in duration. I do that because of the limited attention span. In 2015, Time magazine widely disseminated the results of a study undertaken by Microsoft in 2013. That study reported that people's attention span has gotten shorter since mobile devices have become widely used. We have all been in presentations where we have experienced a boring speaker who speaks in a monotone while reading the words on the slides. These presentations seem to rival propofol for their ability to induce somnolence. Research from almost 50 years ago demonstrated that in most classes, people have an attention span of 15 to 20 minutes. After that, attention starts to wander. To summarize, my podcast will consist of a series of questions. A word of caution. Although I have a substantial amount of experience writing and editing questions, these questions are not vetted the way high-stakes exams questions are vetted. In addition, the questions in my podcasts are intended primarily to teach. With that in mind, sometimes ambiguity is helpful by making the user analyze the question and the responses more carefully. I urge you to pause the podcast to read the question and select your answer before proceeding to the explanation. I will present an explanation for each distractor used in the question. There will be an explanation why each incorrect distractor is wrong, as well as an explanation of the correct answer. I will endeavor to make each podcast about 10 minutes in duration. That not only correlates with the data on attention spans, but also allows the user to target specific areas in a more focused manner. In addition, the podcast is short enough to potentially allow you to learn something while waiting. For example, while waiting for the holding area nurse to finish preparing your patient for the operating room. Thank you, and I hope you learned something from the podcasts.